Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Dowry of Snails and Mud by Brittany Tucker. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, on the subject of mollusks. I hate snails. That's the sum of it. They're awful, gritty, gummy, invasive pests. I plucked a particularly obese specimen out of the mud, rolling it between my fingertips. How would it feel to crush it, to let the shell crack beneath my chipped nails? Do they pop like ripe plums or melt like slugs? Questions for later. Instead of committing a murder, I tossed the defenseless creature into my bucket with a sigh, sending it to join the doomed fate of its brothers and sisters. I glared up at the sky. It had always done a tremendous job of matching my mood, and today wasn't the exception. Gray, bland, and a wee bit testy. Ice-cold raindrops fell, seemingly at random, but somehow still managed to strike the tip of my nose. At this point, the weather hadn't convinced me of its neutrality. You shouldn't scowl at them, my twin brother Driston picked through a patch of reeds. For a moment, I wondered if he meant my aerial attackers or the snails. He sniffed. It's not polite. I arched a brow. Driston grinned at me, his golden blonde hair and dark blue eyes the same color as mine. I snatched a snail from my bucket and chucked it at him. Is this polite? The second snail went airborne. How about this? Driston caught the projectile vermin, then pouted as he cupped them in his palm, stroking their spiral shells. Your misery isn't their fault. Leave them be. They're getting eaten either way. Manners won't save them. Driston huffed. Roasted or not, Rhia, you should be kind to your subjects. His shoulders slumped. But I guess by the end of tomorrow, we'll all be your subjects, won't we? I stood, ignoring the creak in my lower back, nausea rolling through my insides. Subjects. I'll have subjects. Responsibilities. I'll have a husband. I shook my head to chase the thought away. Not now, not today. I turned to my brother, forcing a fake smile. Let's get these back to Papa. I've had enough of waiting around in this slop. Driston nodded and followed me out of the mud flats, a 2-acre flat chunk of land on the outskirts of my village, infested with the round, crunchy critters. We used to farm potatoes in the flats, but with all the rain in the last few years, the ground had congealed into an algae-filled swamp. No more potatoes. The lush, beautiful wetwood forest surrounded the fields, calling to me as we walked, whispering that I should find out just how deep its rabbit holes could go. I ached to feel the bark of oak and ash, to smell the ferns curling out of the earth. I could escape. Just keep running until a less burdensome life found me, or I disappeared completely. I wasn't sure what sounded better. But the forests weren't safe anymore, and we couldn't hunt. Not when invaders loomed just beneath the shadows of the canopy, and they'd stolen all our weapons. I'd put arrows through their eyes if we had any, but arrowheads require steel, and steel required money. We didn't have either. As Driston and I moved across the flats, muck splattered my trouser legs and threatened to suck the boots straight off my feet. I grimaced. This may be my last day wearing pants. It would be all gowns and petticoats from now on. I glanced at the dirt packed beneath my nails, staining my fingers, matching the murky browns of the village ahead. Leon's. My home, the only home I'd ever known. The wetwood forest connected the regions of Montmachard and Gwent, and Leon sat just at the latter's border. I'd grown up surrounded by trees. Earth, bark, and leaves inhabited every part of my soul. As the oldest community in the region of Gwent, a province in southeast Wales, and far from the king and his royal city, Leon's had been here for centuries. Sure, there were other villages, but they'd turned to a nomadic way of life, trekking to the lowlands in the cold months, then to the highlands in the summer. Moving flocks, gaining their income from outside trade. I'd heard some of them had even gone as far as to barter with foreigners on the coasts. But not my people. We were hardy, had overcome every adversity thrown our way, and would continue to do so for hundreds of years more. At least, I'd always thought so. And Papa never failed to remind us of it, again and again. We are not kneelers, he'd say when we were young, sprawled in his armchair, wiping ale foam from his mustache. We don't kiss bottom, scrape boots, or spread sugar on what we say and do. You are a cattle, Rhia, and you bow to no one. I thought these words would protect me, and I often repeated them in the night, wrapped in my threadbare blanket as the wind howled through the cracks in our rattling windows. But now a part of the royal city was coming here. For me. And it felt like one big joke. Except I wasn't laughing. We continued our walk in silence, heavy pails clicking against our knees. I tried to ignore the worried glances Driston sent my way every few paces, as if he expected me to vanish into a mist at any moment. I suppose that's how it must feel, like he is about to lose me. And in a way, he was. He'd see me with his eyes, but a class-fueled barrier would always linger between us now, creating resentment, creating distance, all because I'd soon be marrying a crown prince of Wales. Let's go for a tour, shall we? If you could view it from above, Lyons would look like an oversized carriage wheel. Town Hall sat at the center, an ancient round pine log construction surrounded by hitching posts and hay troughs. Not that we needed them. In total, there were 3 horses in Lyons, all owned by my father, the mayor. Worn dirt streets stretched off in every direction from the hall, leading to the different districts, if you could call them that. The village's west side consisted of the blacksmith, the carpenter, the stonemason, and a butcher, all owned by the same families for generations. The east and south sides were homes, all cut stone, bare windows, and thatch roofs. The north held our meager livestock barns and adjoining pens. What few sheep we owned were used for meat and wool. Even on the rare occasion we did have an abundance, Papa refused to trade. Despite its age, Lyons wasn't large. Some of the younger villages in Gwent had expanded to having thousands of residents, but not us. Our sloppy roads were a hazard to the few precious wagons we owned, used to haul crops to and from the fields, and moving between towns would endanger their delicate wheels. So everyone walked instead. Each town and village elected its own mayor, who served as leader. My ancestors served as mayor since Lyons' founding. Some princes or another controlled many of Wales' regions, but not Gwent. None wanted to travel so far south, especially when the king's current residence, Eberron, lay in the western region of Ceredigion by the sea. I do feel obligated to tell you that Wales doesn't really have a king, just a prince who rules in place of the King of England, then continues to spawn gaggles of potential future princes. But for simplicity's sake, though, we'll call the head prince the king, and not all of his princes are sons. Some are appointed, allowed to rule smaller regions. All of them are a nuisance. Lyons might not be much, but it's mine, and I know every twig, tree, and root, every incline and slope in the landscape. No one could take that from me, the deep-rooted sense of belonging to the land. You are a cattle, and you bow to no one. Smoke billowed from Town Hall's chimney along with steam as raindrops hit the hot stones. Driston opened the main doors, and a glorious wave of burning air slapped me in the face, greedily sucking the moisture off my damp skin. After a moment, my eyes adjusted to the dim lights and dryness. Despite our low supply of candles, I counted 10 lit and randomly placed on the hall's encircling floor-to-ceiling shelves what little light they gave, absorbing into the dark cherry walls. As we moved inside, I curled up like a pill bug to find a place to stand between all the sweaty bodies. Every face in the village had arrived to help prepare for the most dreaded, exciting event in Lyons' history. My wedding. As others noticed my arrival, I managed to grin back at the cordial smiles that greeted me. Pleasant, but not friendly. I'm sure most of them would have loved to knock my teeth out. They weren't any happier for the coming ceremony than I was. Catching sight of Papa, Driston and I pressed against the walls, sidling through the crowd until we'd reached the opposite end of the room. A massive rounded hearth towered in the center of the hall, customarily surrounded by benches so the villagers could gather to keep warm during the cold months. Now the benches sat in lined rows to be used as tables, the hearth commissioned for cooking and boiling water instead of just a tow heater. Papa smiled at us as we approached, in all his round-bellied glory, complemented by his thinning blonde hair and chipped peg leg. The mayor of Lyons, and the reason it had to be me getting married tomorrow. Let me explain. Papa stopped paying the king's tax years ago. Refused would be a better word. If the king couldn't protect us and feed us when we starved, why should he pay them? What does that flat-bottomed prick know of toiling in the soil? He'd rant. Has he ever felt the sun beating on his back, knowing his crack would be pink by the end of the day and keep working despite? I think not. I can't respect a man that's never had a burnt crack. And Papa got away with it for a time, until the king demanded the gold due to him, and Papa refused. The king continued to insist, and Papa continued to decline. And the spiral went on, until one day Papa got a letter. The prince, the king's sixth son, would be here by the end of the month to take my hand. Papa was furious. Mama said I should see it as an honor, but the entire village and I saw it for what it was. A trap. If we refused the proposal and insulted the king, that would be a good enough excuse to wipe Lyons off the map without drawing any sour looks from his lords. If we accepted, he got to rid himself of an extra son, while also sending someone to force us into submission. Little did the prince know I wasn't the only one who'd refused to bow. My people didn't take well to strangers. He was in for the ride of his life. About time you trouts showed up, Papa gruffed, taking our buckets. Starting to wonder if the mudflats finally swallowed you both whole. He winked. I hate being wrong, and here I hoped I'd have 2 less mouths to feed. If only, I rolled my eyes. I'd take being eaten by a mud monster over what's to come any day. Papa's lips pursed, avoiding my gaze as he set our new crop of snails aside for washing. Later, we'd haul them to the castle for boiling. Yes, Lyons has its very own castle. No, it doesn't have a name, so don't ask. My name's something without a purpose. It's a ruin now, but after tomorrow, it would be my home. Maybe I'll come up with a title later? I smiled to myself. The Pit of Despair. No, that's already taken. I glanced around, sucking in a deep breath. There were so many snails to be washed, it would take all night. Didn't feel like spending my last evening as a free woman shoving my fingers in nasty, stinking shell holes. Unless... I crossed my arms and batted my lashes. Have you seen Mama? Papa nodded, stirring a bubbling cauldron that contained the malted grain recipe he used for ale by the smell. She's helping with the vegetables. He snipped at the steaming water and made a face. Lord above, what I'd give for a real drink. You'd think someone in this blasted region would know how to make a good ale. If only your grandfather were still alive. God rest his brewer's soul. Can you get Mama for me? My words came out sharp, but I managed to twist them into a croon, making Driston raise a brow. I ignored him. My feet are killing me. Papa blinked, startled. It wasn't often I asked for things from him outright. Everyone else, sure, but not him, being the man of the house and all. He wiped his muddy hands onto his pant leg. All right. Hold on. Once he'd hobbled out of eyeshot, I grinned at my brother, nodding toward the full pails. Help me load these on the wagon, would you? Driston's brows rose even higher, wrinkling his forehead. But they're disgusting. I know, my grin widened. Let my dear sweet prince enjoy a mouthful of grit. It's good for his health, you know, very cleansing for the bowels. It took a moment for Driston's smile matched mine. You realize we all have to eat those, right? I shrugged. It won't kill you, but it will be wonderfully satisfying for me. You're a terror. Another shrug. No more than you. The girls cooking will see the dirt, and you'll tell them to ignore it. I gestured to our hall. After you. Driston lifted 2 of the pails, shaking his head. How your new husband will love you so. All smiles died from my lips. Husband. The word echoed painfully through my mind. I'm not ready. Even if 16 was a perfectly average age to marry in Wales, the exact age Mama and Papa wed, that didn't mean it's what I wanted, what I dreamed of, what I planned. My face fell. Did I have plans, dreams? As much as I like to think so, freedom wasn't a gift often given to girls. I'd heard that in some places in the world, women weren't even allowed to speak unless their men gave them permission. How prehistoric. They'd have to cut my tongue out. I subconsciously ran my tongue across the back of my teeth and shuddered. Driston sensed my dimming mood and hustled off with the snails. I picked a kitchen knife off the bench that sat beside the empty buckets from yesterday's catch. We'd been digging dirt snails for a week, and still the flats were full of the beasts. Local legend tells that they grew from the dirt like the undead, but instead of fangs and claws, they used slime as their weapon. Twirling the blade between my fingers to calm myself, I stared into the hearth of the room's center, the flames more than happy to share their warmth as they danced. All this bustle, all these people, they turned town hall into a preparation room. All and everything needed to bake, broil, sew, and clean, and I'm sure they hated every moment of it, because of me, Lyons would soon have a new overlord. If only I'd been born a boy, then this would be someone else's problem. Sniffing along the edge of the bench, a bony mouse crept toward the remaining snails, hoping to steal a meal. I smiled at it. So sweet, so soft, just like the prince would be, according to the other girls in the village. Every time they saw me, they sniggered behind their hands. An oversized Wolverine of a woman, they called me. It's not that I'm ugly, per se, but I stood as tall, if not taller, than most men, and nearly as strong from the farm work I'd done since I could walk. In a gown, I'd be a laughingstock. I flicked my wrist, and the knife soared, lodging into the mouse's neck just as Driston returned from more buckets. He yelped, "Lord above, Rhia!" He yanked the blade out of the floorboard, picking up the mouse by its tail. "I know someone that needs a hot meal." I gestured to the last buckets. "Get the rest of them in the wagon, then meet me outside. Hurry before Mama and Papa come back." Driston rolled his eyes. "So bossy, and you're not even a princess yet. Give me a second." Just dipped my chin in response, hoping he didn't see how much that comment unsettled me. Princess. I'd rather be a cavern hag or a spinster. Who am I kidding? They're the same thing. By the time we'd hiked home together, the rain had returned. First in a heavy mist, but it wasn't long before it became a full-blown downpour. The mud deepened the further from the town center we walked, filling my boots and seeping between my toes. Our hut was small, much too small to house 4 people. With only 2 rooms, we used one as a combined kitchen and dining area, and the other a bedroom we all shared, sleeping on separate straw mats. Dripping wet, I peeled off my coat as I stepped inside, laying it over the back of our rickety wooden chair. My cheeks burned from the cold, and I patted them, hoping to get some sensation back into my fingers and face. Driston wasn't far behind. I wandered into our bedroom, and as expected, my fat orange tabby, Jace, lay sprawled over my mat. "Jacey," I whispered in a sing-song voice, and he raised his head, whiskers rumpled from sleep. I dangled a mouse, and whap, he clawed it from my fingers and hunched over the rodent, growling and spitting as if he had caught the wretched thing himself. Gently, I stroked his back, careful not to bump his stiff, aging hind legs. Driston leaned against the doorway, water dripping from his coat as heavily as it leaked through the holes in the roof. "We're not going to have enough food to last the winter, you know, especially not after this feast." I nodded slowly, ruffling Jace's fur. "Maybe this prince can help." I snorted. "Well, if worst comes to worst, we can just eat him, I guess. Great idea." Driston chuckled softly, then patted my shoulder. "Everything's going to be okay." I smirked. "You can marry him then if you're so sure." "Rhia," he exhaled, shaking his head as he walked away, from the sound of it, to stoke the coals in the fire. Jace smeared the mouse's blood on my pants as he crawled into my lap. I kissed his soft head as he licked his paws clean. If only I could stay here forever, freeze this moment in time so my future would never come, it fading away like a nightmare by dawn. By tomorrow night, I would no longer be Rhia Caddell, the mayor's daughter, the wild child, flying as free as a dandelion seed on a summer breeze. I would be a princess wife, and never had a thought repulsed me more.